Hello everyone, and welcome to Behind the Bulletin. Today, we're diving into a story that has captured the attention of fans both in Korea and around the world. New developments surrounding one of the most beloved celebrity couples have sparked strong reactions, heartfelt discussions, and widespread curiosity online. Fans react strongly to new developments surrounding Hyun and son Ye-jin. What exactly happened? And why are fans responding so passionately? Stay with us as we break it all down, starting right now. It started quietly, almost innocently. A single update. A brief mention. A subtle shift in tone that most casual observers might have missed. But for fans who had followed every chapter of their story, it was enough to send a ripple through an already attentive audience. Within minutes, timelines began to move faster. Screens refreshed. Comments multiplied. Something was happening. And everyone could feel it. At first, reactions were cautious. Fans tried to remain calm, reminding one another not to jump to conclusions. Let's wait, some wrote. We don't know the full story yet. Patience is fragile in the digital age, especially when emotions are involved. The more people tried to slow things down, the faster speculation seemed to grow. Memories resurfaced. Old interviews were reposted. Past moments were revisited, reinterpreted, and reframed under the lens of the present. Once felt reassuring now felt ambiguous. A smile from years ago suddenly looked different. A sentence, once dismissed as casual, began to feel loaded with meaning. The date itself was not dramatic. That was the most unsettling part. There was no shocking announcement. No clear explanation, just enough information to unsettle certainty. And when certainty disappears, imagination rushes in to fill the gap. Fans began to ask questions not because they wanted drama, but because silence felt louder than words. Online communities divided almost instantly. One side urged restraint, insisting that nothing truly alarming had been said or done. The other sensed change, something subtle but significant. You don't feel this shift unless something's different, one fan wrote. And thousands agreed. Emotion overtook logic. Some expressed concern, others disappointment, others fierce protectiveness. The couple had long represented stability, warmth, and endurance in an industry known for unpredictability. Suggestion, real or imagined, that this image might be changing struck a nerve. Then came the theories. Aren't wild at first. Just careful guesses. Possible explanations. Contextual assumptions. But as more voices joined the conversation, those theories began to stretch. Each new interpretation pushed the story further from its origin, shaping a narrative that felt increasingly urgent, increasingly dramatic. The update was no longer just an update. It had become a trigger. And once triggered, the reaction could not be undone. By the next day, the reaction had reached a point of no return. What began as discussion evolved into emotional debate. Some fans spoke of sleepless nights, refreshing feeds in search of reassurance. Others expressed frustration, not at the couple, but at the uncertainty itself. The waiting became exhausting. The not knowing more difficult than any confirmed outcome might have been. Silence continued. No clarification arrived to calm the waters. No statement emerged to anchor the conversation back to reality. And in that vacuum, the story continued to grow, shaped by emotion rather than fact. Interestingly, a shift began to occur. The tone softened, not because the concern faded, because perspective started to emerge. Fans began questioning the intensity of their own reactions. Why does this feel so personal? One comment asked. Why are we so afraid of change? That question lingered. It forced a reckoning, not just about the update, about the relationship between public figures and those who admire them. Where does concern end and projection begin? At what point does support turn into pressure? Some fans pulled back. Others to remember that real lives are not storylines, and that not every development needs an immediate emotional response. Others pushed back, arguing that care is inseparable from emotion. Both sides were right, and that tension defined the moment. Gradually, the conversation matured. Instead of focusing solely on what might be wrong, more voices began to focus on what had always been consistent: resilience, privacy, and a history of navigating attention with grace. The update, once magnified into a possible turning point, to feel smaller, still important, but no longer overwhelming. The reaction had run its course. What remained was reflection. Fans realized that their response said as much about themselves as it did about the situation. The fear of losing something admired. Comfort with ambiguity. The instinct to protect narratives that feel meaningful. And no dramatic revelation arrived. Something else did, understanding. Not every story unfolds loudly. Not every change is a crisis. And sometimes, the strongest reaction comes not from what is said, but from what is left unsaid. The update faded from headlines. The moment lingered. It reminded everyone watching that admiration is powerful. Emotion is contagious. And silence can stir more feeling than words ever could. And perhaps that was the true development all along. As the initial shock settled, a new phase began, quieter, heavier, far more complicated. The conversation did not disappear. It transformed. What had once been frantic speculation slowed into something more intense, analysis. Fans no longer asked only what was happening. Why it felt so unsettling. The update itself remained unchanged. Yet its weight seemed to grow with every passing hour. The story was no longer driven by new information. The absence of it. Silence became the center of attention. Every day without clarification was interpreted as intentional. Some believed it was a sign of careful control. Others saw it as avoidance. The same silence was read as protection by some, as distance by others. The divide deepened, not between fans and the couple, but among fans themselves. Online spaces grew emotionally charged. Posts became longer, more personal. Fans shared memories of how the couple's story had comforted them during difficult times. For many, this was never just about celebrities. It was about stability. About believing that something genuine could survive constant scrutiny. The idea that this image might be changing, however slightly, felt like a personal loss. That emotional attachment fueled intensity. Fans grew defensive, pushing back hard against any interpretation that hinted at trouble. Others felt uneasy, insisting that ignoring discomfort would only make it worse. I'd accused the other of overreacting. Yet both were reacting from the same place, care. Media coverage adapted quickly. Headlines became more suggestive. Phrased to imply turning points without confirming anything. Phrases like raising questions and sparking debate appeared everywhere. The story was no longer about facts. Reactions, and reactions, unlike facts, are limitless. Meanwhile, the couple remained absent from the narrative they no longer controlled. That absence gave the story momentum. Fans filled the void with their own voices, projecting fears, hopes, and expectations. Began to wonder if the pressure itself was the real issue, not the update, but the way the world demanded meaning from it. Fatigue set in. People were tired of speculating, yet unable to stop. They wanted resolution, but also feared it. Because resolution, whatever form it took, would end the shared moment of anticipation. It would force everyone to confront reality. It might be simpler, or far more disappointing. The story they had built. Gradually, a subtle shift occurred. The most extreme voices faded. Not because they were proven wrong, but because they ran out of emotional energy. What remained were quieter reflections. Fans began asking whether their reaction had crossed a line. Whether concern had turned into pressure. Whether love, when magnified by millions, could become suffocating. This self-awareness marked a turning point. The story was no longer escalating outward, it was turning inward. Fans looked at themselves, at their expectations, at the way they clung to narratives that felt reassuring. The update had become a mirror, reflecting collective anxiety more than actual change. Well, the tension did not vanish. It settled, like a held breath that had not yet been released. And sensed that something, anything, could shift the story again. A single sentence, a photo, confirmation or denial. Until then, reaction remained suspended, hovering between fear and acceptance. And in that suspension, the weight of public attention revealed itself. In the end, the strongest development was not the update itself, but the reaction it sparked. What unfolded over days of speculation revealed something deeper than headlines or rumors. It showed how deeply fans connect to stories they believe in, how easily silence can magnify emotion. Uncertainty can turn admiration into anxiety. It did not come from confirmed change, but from the fear of losing something that felt steady in an unpredictable world. This moment reminded everyone watching that public figures live real lives beyond the narratives built around them. Not every pause signals a crisis. Not every shift demands explanation. Sometimes, restraint is not avoidance, it is protection. As the noise slowly settles, what remains is perspective. Perspective that stories are still unfolding. Perspective that not everything meaningful happens in public. Perspective that patience, though difficult, is often the most respectful response. Perhaps that is the real takeaway from this chapter. Not the fear of change, but the value of allowing space for it. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We truly appreciate your time, your curiosity, your willingness to look beyond speculation and reflect on the bigger picture. If this story encouraged you to pause, to question reactions, or to think more deeply about how attention shapes narratives, achieved something meaningful. This has been Behind the Bulletin. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again in our next story.